All right, welcome back to the Wizard of Radical Self Respect. Today, I want to go over the best narcissist repellent there is, practicing radical self respect. And if you're familiar with my ebook and audiobook, Radical Self Respect Avoid Falling for the Same BS, I have 17 requirements of radical self respect. And in this part one, I think we're going to go over the first four. And I'll probably do like 3 to 4 parts of this thing, but it's super important. And what these requirements of radical self respect do is they act as a guardrail. And when we live within this framework, they protect us from falling into toxic situations and they protect us from being disrespected. And once you see and hear what they are, you'll understand why that is. But if you can practice this in your life, you will be protected. And that's one of the big things I see with my coaching clients too. I want them to get to a place where in 6 months, they look back and they think, wow, I can't even believe I put up with some of the stuff that I did. That's my goal. But number one, the first requirement of radical self respect: own everything about ourselves, our likes, dislikes, opinions, values, and boundaries. We will not apologize or make excuses for who we are. We completely accept ourselves, and others can take it or leave it. One thing people pleasers seem to do a lot is they try to twist and contort themselves to get other people to like them. This is something that codependents will do as well. But when we do this, we are not being authentic. We are acting from a place of inauthenticity or people pleasing, or we want a certain outcome. And that's another important thing. Outcome independence. People who don't have outcome independence, they may catch themselves wanting to twist and distort and force a certain outcome. And there's a crude yet effective expression that goes, love is like a fart. If you have to force it, it's probably crap. Crude, but very true. So when we catch ourselves not being who we are and just kind of owning it, we should ask ourselves a couple questions. Why are we doing that, for one? Why aren't we owning it? Why are we afraid in this particular circumstance to not be us? Because whatever that answer is pretty important. And often what it is you want somebody else to like you. You want somebody else to like you, so you're trying to bend and twist a little bit to get them to like you. But ironically, this makes it less likely that they will like you anyway. People like somebody who's authentic. And when you're authentic, though, some people will just not like you too. And we have to accept that. But when we're authentic, the right kinds of people, they will be a part of our lives. And the ones who don't, oh well, they just won't. We can't expect everybody to like us. If you're honest and you're assertive, you will have people out there that just don't like you. They're not going to like your takes. They're not going to like your opinions, and that's fine. It doesn't mean you have to scream all of your opinions everywhere you go and from the rooftop. There's a time and place for that too sometimes, but just own them and accept them. And when the time is right, you can share them. Not every hill will be a hill to die on, though, too. That's something else to take note of. But this owning yourself part is big. Number two, have a plan of attack in all areas. It is essential to have a plan for our lives. This does not mean we cannot be flexible, but we at least have a direction we are headed towards. We stay organized, and this makes it easier to execute our plans. Having a plan is very crucial. And there's a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It talks about how we need to act with the end in mind. And when we act with the end in mind, we can kind of work backwards. We can work backwards from there and say, okay, this is where I want to go. What are the steps to get there? And it does really help. I'm a big advocate of writing things down, trying to plan things out. And this goes for boundaries too, when it comes to a narcissistic person or anybody for that matter. Often people struggle with boundaries when they don't even know what their boundaries would be in a situation. And part of this comes with age, but we begin to learn about ourselves. We recognize what our limits are and what we like and what we don't like. And what isn't good for us and what is good for us, what kind of environments we thrive in, and what kind of environments seem to be taking from us and are bad energy for us. These are all things to take into consideration. But the boundary thing, knowing what they are, and then you have a plan of how you're going to communicate that boundary to other people. And I found for myself, when I have a plan, it's much easier to enforce that boundary. And you tell them, you don't say you can't, you'll say something like, I've decided not to. That is much more effective than saying can't, because when you say can't, it can be interpreted as a fight, that somebody wants to talk you out of it. That's why I've decided not to. It's much more effective. But this is true for all areas, though, when it comes to plans. Plan your investments, plan your career, try to plan your day, your week, have longer term goals, shorter term goals. That's the goal with this here. Now, there's also an expression I happen to agree with. If you want to make the universe or God laugh, you tell them your plans. Which means what? That you have to be flexible sometimes, because we can't see the future. Things will pop up and we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to be flexible and bend a little bit in some cases. But a plan, very key. Number 3, whatever we are doing, give our absolute best. No half-assing. So our work is a reflection of us, and we only want to be putting forth an aura of excellence. How we do one thing is often how we do everything. And it's like Buddy the Real Estate King from American Beauty. He says, in order to be successful, one must project an image of success at all times. And I do think the way we do one thing is how we do almost everything. It's why I carry these wands around all the time in my ear or whatever. And it's because the little things matter. These wands, they're a reminder to myself. The little things do matter. And if we can't do the little things right, we're not going to be able to do the big things right. And I try to remind myself to keep a little magic in each day too. But that's the goal with this here. We want to put forth that energy of, yeah, we respect and value our work, and we want to put in the effort. And if we try to shortcut in one area, often that bleeds over into other areas too, and it's not too good. But I think sometimes what I would get myself in trouble with was, if I wasn't where I wanted to be, I would say to myself, oh, it's okay to not give my best because this is just a stepping stone. But the thing is, with that is, it's hard to break the patterns. The patterns of this are tough to break. That's why it's good to always put forth that effort, because it's easier to continue that pattern than it is to try to turn it off and on. Turning it off and on is tough, but the pattern, that is key. And after all, we only have one life to live. And I think when we're 80 years old, 90 years old, we want to look back at our lives and be happy with the choices we made and how we worked and what we have to show for ourselves. It is a reflection of us. And you know what also is a reflection of us? Our partners are a reflection of us. And that's why it's important to choose wisely in that area too. One of the most important decisions we're going to make is who we choose to partner up with. I mean, people are going to judge each other based on that. It's a reflection of your internal state and what you're willing to accept and to not accept. Don't forget that either. And I know some of these aren't really about narcissistic repellents yet. I promise you they will in the later numbers here if we get to them. And depending on how long I'm willing to go here, we might be able to get through all of them right now. But number 4, now probably not. I'm probably going to break it up because I don't want to have it be like 20 minutes in that I start talking about the good ones. But number 4, remain emotionally independent. Too many people confuse emotional dependence for love. This kind of love is immature. When we remain emotionally independent, we are getting fulfillment from our own lives, and we are able to make better decisions. Emotional dependence leads to suffering. I've said before that narcissists seem to have a sixth sense for people that have a hungry heart. And to an extent, I think anyone can have a hungry heart a little bit. But narcissists also seem to have a sixth sense for people that can feel guilty saying no, or maybe who are people pleasers, or maybe who are codependent, or people will say empaths. I prefer to say good-hearted myself. But that emotional independence part, getting more fulfillment from our own lives, that's never the wrong thing to do. It is always the right thing to do to get more fulfillment from our lives, whether it's our hobbies, our friends, our career, our families, our physical health, our mental health. Those are all things that we got to work on. And the better we are in those areas, the better quality people we will be able to attract. And like I said there, a lot of people confuse emotional dependency for love. And what is emotional dependency? That is when you rely on somebody more so than what is healthy. And maybe you let them determine your moods. And ironically, narcissists and codependents both do this. Narcissists try to control other people to regulate their emotions. They try to regulate the inside of themselves with other people. And they try to get other people to meet their needs on the inside. And they do it by force and by control a lot of times. Codependents do it from a different angle, but they also still do it. They think if only other people would act a certain way, they would be okay on the inside. You see this a lot with codependent parents, where they get all caught up on their children's issues and they really want them to act a certain way, but it's to relieve the parent's anxiety more than it is to do what is best for the child. And those kinds of parents, they often struggle with letting their kids develop their own identity and letting them become autonomous. They struggle with that and they want to control them. And it's similar, as honestly, that's similar to what narcissistic parents could do too. The difference would be the narcissistic parent would be a little more manipulative and harsh with it than the codependent parent. But they're both externally regulated a little bit. It just looks different. But it's good to know that, because often the codependent person doesn't realize that they are also externally regulated, except their regulation comes from one person. They want that narcissistic person usually to act right. And if they act right, they're good. But if they don't act right, then everything's chaos. And they'll talk on and on and on about that narcissistic person. And that's the big thing in my coaching sessions too. You always know when someone's a little more on the codependent side when they're talking to me. I hear them talk 90% of the time about somebody else, because that's the quote unquote problem person in their life right now. But that's how I know they're kind of subscribed to that narcissistic person's reality, because the whole time they're talking about that person. They're not talking about their own lives. They're not talking about their own goals. They're talking about somebody else. But that's how you know they've wandered down the wrong path. And the way to go, unsubscribe from that reality. When you unsubscribe, there's going to be things you start to notice. And what you start to notice is, it's going to be tough at first because you have to break the trauma bond and try to go no contact. But what will go on is you'll probably feel hurt and you'll miss them even more at first, because even an unhealthy attachment, the trauma bond, is still an attachment. That can't be, you can't forget that. So it's normal to grieve and whatever. But then you begin to realize you don't think about them first before you make every decision. You don't run it through their lens. You start to run things through your own lens and your own code of conduct. And you think, okay, what's important to me? What should I do in this situation? Not what would they think about this? What would they do? Because that's what I hear. That's what I hear a lot when people are in the trauma bond. They're running everything through somebody else's lens. Don't let that be you. Number 5, we treat our time like the extremely sacred resource it is. Time is one thing we can never get back after it's spent. We choose to spend our time wisely with people who value it. We spend our time doing things we enjoy doing, and when in doubt, if it's not a hell yeah, it's an F no. Time is absolutely valuable, no doubt. And people squander time, unfortunately, with people who are not good for them, or just people who don't value them. That's one of the most important things that I see. They'll spend time on people that just aren't returning the sentiment. And that is something that I'm going to get into in one of the later requirements here. But the hell yeah or if it's not a hell yeah, if it's an F no part, that's something that if you can't live that in your life, you got to really think about why is it or what situations am I struggling to live this in. I know for me, for example, if I wanted to date or maybe I wanted intercourse or something, I'd be tempted maybe to look past that. But it's not really good to do that. You don't want to do that. And but this goes for our careers, this goes for our hobbies, this goes for a lot of things. And it's just a guideline that we only really want to be doing things we're excited about. And another good thing to note with it is just because the footwork towards something might not be a hell yeah, the end result might be. And if the end result is a hell yeah, that's something you still may want to do. But our time's valuable, and we don't want to waste it on people who are not returning the sentiment. Number 6. This is self-explanatory, but stay in great shape and look the best we can. We can only have one body, and we take care of it accordingly. We have good posture, blah, blah, blah. So with this one, our health, it just shows that we respect ourselves, and it shows that we want to be in peak condition with our mental health, our spiritual health, and our emotional health. It is connected. Now, for me, if you have other issues going on with trauma or other mental health issues, some of them can be pretty powerful, right? If you have trauma or personality disorders, you can be in great shape. It'll help, but it's not going to cure those things. So, but being in good shape does absolutely help. Number 7, have our money working for us. This is also kind of self-explanatory too, but I'm a big fan of investing. I'm a big fan of getting your money working for you, because if you're only ever trading your time for money, which is what most people do, you can only get so far. All of the wealthy people in the world, that's what they've done. They either create something and sell it, start a business, and they get their money working for them. That's what they do. There is no other way around it. And some people can hate on capitalism and say, I don't want to play that game or play that hustle culture thing. And I totally get it. There's certainly negatives to capitalism, no doubt. But the problem is, I don't want to leave my life up to other people changing the system of government that we're in. I don't want to spend my life hoping that happens. I'm going to do what I can within the framework that's given to me. And right now, money is still important, because how much money you have and how you make it determines a lot about how you will spend the majority of your time. And if you value your time, in turn, then you kind of got to value your money. And again, maybe in the perfect world, this wouldn't be how it is. But we're not in the perfect world. And the other systems of government, I think they have their own problems too. So there's going to be a problem with any system of government. But right now, we're more in a mixed bag economy in America. But we can invest, and I think it does give people that do well a lot of freedoms. The problem with capitalism would be there's also a lot of losers too. But this is not a political channel, so we're not going to get too far into that. Number 8, always live at the edge of our comfort zones. Now, I only said we're going to do 4, but here we are at number 8. Always live at the edge of our comfort zones. We know growth occurs when we force ourselves to become uncomfortable and try new things. If we are getting too comfortable, we have stopped growing. The fear of trying new things is really the fear of being a beginner and making mistakes in front of others. This comfort zone thing is huge, because if we're complacent and we stop pushing ourselves, we stop growing. And there is a thing, and this is where I think only validating others has its limits. When we only validate other people, they're not getting to the place of growth. And some people, they're just not going to get there unless they're pushed or strongly guided, unfortunately. And if you're the coach or if you're the therapist, what do you do in that situation when there's somebody that's just not willing to get into that discomfort? I think you got to at least tell them. You got to at least tell them, because as a coach or therapist or psychologist, you're doing your clients a disservice if you're only validating. And I'm not saying that you are going to be harsh with how you do it, but to let them stay stuck, to me, that's malpractice. But we got to get through that. And the fear of being a beginner, often the fear of making mistakes in front of others, that can be a really scary thing. And it's awkward. But once you get through that first little bit, then it becomes just like riding a bicycle and you get used to it. But I know for me, yeah, it can be really uncomfortable and it can stop you. It can stop you in the beginning. But one of the ways to help with that is to try to be more okay being embarrassed. That's a big one I've tried to use as a mindset trick. And the other one is getting curious. When we're curious and we're okay with being embarrassed, we'll get ourselves out in more situations. Now, for me, myself, though, I'm an outgoing introvert. So what happens to me is when I get out in big public places, it can be draining. It's exhausting for me to be around lots of people. And it's way different, honestly, communicating in front of an audience like this. This isn't depleting. Like I can speak like this because it's more of a monologue, but this doesn't really deplete me. But if I was around all sorts of people right now, that would deplete me. Absolutely, it would. And then I would need to recharge by myself in the room. And it's just exhausting. But that's the introvert struggle. It's not the extrovert struggle. The extroverts, I always joke, they're like psychopaths. They get energized from other people. And to me, I'm just the opposite of that. So we don't splice too well. So let's see. 9. Oh, but anyway, so the finish number 8 here. When you live at the edge of your comfort zone, if you're not doing one thing that scares you a week, or at least once a month, you've probably become a little complacent. And I forget whether it was Eleanor Roosevelt or Ralph Waldo Emerson, but they said, he who is every day conquering some fear has learned the key to life. That was Ralph Waldo, but that's very true. Number 9, remain humble in success. Now, this is probably a good one to end on here. And I'm going to end on a little bit of a tangent because I'm going to tell you a story what happened on Facebook too. But how people act when they have it all says a lot about them. Some people treat the little guy poorly, and others come off as really arrogant or put others down. Character is how we treat people who can do nothing for us. We try to treat all people well and with respect. That character part is huge. This is something to watch out for with narcissistic people too. Watch how they treat people who can do nothing for them, or watch how they'll treat people when there is no way to brag about it or get some sort of narcissistic supply from it. Something to pay attention to. But what happens with them is, this is what I was going to say too. A lot of people get arrogant and their head gets blown up. And I don't think it's possible. It's not possible to develop narcissistic personality disorder as an adult, but it is possible to develop narcissistic traits. And it is possible to develop a big ego. I think that for certain to be true. And today I made a post about Jason Kelce and Kylie Kelce. And I had said, I appreciate that Kylie Kelce is humble. And people took that to mean that I must then mean that Taylor Swift is not. And honestly, I was pretty annoyed about this because that was not where I was expecting that to be going at all. And I'm somebody, I've never understood the hate about Taylor Swift. I think it's awesome she supports her man. I think every man wishes they would have a woman like that. And it's not her fault. The cameras are always on her. She's just the most famous person in the building. And so it comes with the territory. So I've never understood the hate. But the fact that I said I appreciated that Kylie Kelce didn't like the camera and remained humble, I'm comparing her and bashing Taylor Swift now. And here's the thing about this. So when somebody's wounded or emotionally immature a little bit, they'll begin to see things in black and white. And they'll start bleeding on people who didn't cut them. So that's not supposed to be a comparison. But somebody who's looking to be offended a little bit, or maybe they're wounded, they're going to look for reasons to be upset. And they're going to look for things to be offended about. And when they see it, they're going to pounce. And then they're going to lack object constancy, which means what? It means they're going to have a hard time seeing somebody positively when they have one disagreement. So people were saying to me, oh, this one post means it really takes away from all of your other content because you made this one post. And I didn't even say anything explicitly. They looked into it. They read into it to be offended. And I'm like, that's all it takes. An imaginary comparison that I didn't even make, but they're going to say I'm bashing other people now that I said I liked that Kylie Kelsey is humble. But this is what happens. I saw the same thing happen to the holistic psychologist the other day on Instagram. And what happened was she made a post about disconnecting from social media. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's a good thing to do, right? But the people who were looking to be offended, they found a way to be offended. And they said, disconnect from social media? How about all the people that can't disconnect from social media? You have all this privilege to be able to disconnect. But if someone's in a war zone or somewhere else, they can't disconnect. And it's like, okay. But I think this part of disconnecting doesn't mean you turn a blind eye to everything. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you ignore problems. You can disconnect occasionally, but still be engaged and still care about issues and still try to work on them. The holistic psychologist, she talks a lot about extended empathy too. And I think that's a good way to put it, where some people, once they see this like injustice in the world anywhere, they can't let it go. And it robs them of their peace. And some people would say to me, oh, you're privileged for even saying that, Jared, that you robbed them of your peace. But it's like, well, I mean, what's important to you? You can't change everything. I think wisdom is knowing you can't solve it all. You can try to work hard towards issues, take a couple issues that are meaningful to you and important, and work towards them. But what else can you do? You can talk about them, but I also think talk without action doesn't go too far either. But my point with all of this is how people can take one thing, read into it, and then become offended. But it really only becomes a problem because people can't disagree without getting super upset a lot of times. And they get really hurt, and then they'll pull your beliefs to the extreme. They'll read into it, and it's black and white thinking. And they're not able to have nuance with it. And they'll say, as they were saying to the holistic psychologist, they're like, you said this, you said disconnect. Some people can't. You only pinned comments that agreed with you, and now I hate you. And now I'm going to disconnect from you completely. And I called somebody childish for doing that. And they said, well, I'm reserving my right to disconnect. And I said, well, touche to that part. But I still think it's childish for you to neglect all of the good things that she had done before because you disagreed with one post. Like, where is the emotional maturity with this? Where is the object constancy, being able to maintain positive feelings for somebody, even when you have a disagreement, even when you don't agree with everything they say? Where is it? And to me, this is one of the most frustrating things about being a creator, is the people who do that. You'll say something, you'll have no idea it's going to be taken in a direction it would. I bet you the holistic psychologist didn't realize it was going to be taken in that direction. Just like when I mentioned Kylie Kelsey, I didn't think it was going to be taken in the Taylor Swift direction, but yet it was. And then people were really lashing into me about that. And it's like, as a creator, what can I do? I can't control how other people will think. I got to try to be as clear as possible. But that's it. The outcomes from there, that's on them. I try to be clear. I try not to step on anybody's toes or do things disrespectful. But people are going to look into things sometimes, and they'll find something. I promise you. Any other creators out there, they're going to find something. There's just no way around it. But that's all we can do. We take care of our side. And I did make a post about a boundary and a consequence tonight too. And what the consequence was, I don't like people telling me what I should be doing. You can make a suggestion, but don't tell me. It's like, unless you're going to start paying my bills, you're not going to tell me what I should be doing, period. So people who tell me what to do, bye-bye. Make a suggestion, that's fine. But the point of this, remain humble in success, it shows a lot about who you are. It speaks to your character. And the people who become arrogant and become self-aggrandizing, you don't need that. That's not too fun. But I think this is a good place to end here. We've gotten through, how many did we get through? 9. And there's 7 left. And these next 7 here, 10 to 17, they're the meat and potatoes of this narcissistic repellent things. So if you got this far, I appreciate you watching. I know I haven't done a live stream for a while, but I will be doing more interviews again soon too. And if you got this far, again, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Maybe share this with somebody else that you think might benefit. And maybe comment below some of your thoughts on these first 9 requirements of radical self-respect. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned. I think in a day or two, I'll be doing the next 7 requirements. And they're the real meat and potatoes, the guardrails of how to protect yourself from narcissists and any toxic people or situations in general. So with that, thanks again. Over and out.